begins in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to College Lacrosse Live. Welcome, fans. How are we doing? Nice little weekend of lacrosse we had. We're going to go around the nation here, around all of the results that we had. We're going to touch on some Big Ten special. We've got Big Ten's an interesting one this year, man. There's just, I mean, you look at Maryland not having the greatest season, Michigan maybe not having the greatest season, and then you've got some standouts on that side. But we're going to touch on the bubble for that conference in particular, kind of put the magnifying glass on them. It's a good day, man. It's we're both dealing with pollen here in the South. I don't know about you folks up in the North, but what's happening? What's going on?
Yeah,
Zach?
pollen season. Everything's turning yellow. We got the haze going on.
The haze. You leave your phone down for a second, man, or you just sit down on the couch, like you said, and you stand up and you're like, I just left the indent here.
I love that. I remember seeing a video like, just like bump a backhoe into a pine tree down here, and it's just like this, the cloud of yellow.
Oh yeah.
Expands. I don't think people really have a good grasp of what happens to us down here this time of year.
We also have some Week 8 results to get to. I mean, Week 8, man, we're already there. We're getting into the meat of the season, into conference play. So we got a lot to touch on. I really want to frame this a certain way, though, because, we got the top 20 that just came out. We've been talking bracketology. We've been talking RPIs. And Zach has been a very big defender of one team. And you know what? That team got it done today. So we're going to start today with good old Duke and Denver here on a Sunday. We had some nice Sunday lacrosse. Let's go into Duke and Denver. And I guess we're having muted clips on the channel here today, but I'll stay muted as well because I'm not the one that should be talking. Zach, the one that defended Duke for so long, and now has the chance to speak his piece. It's your floor, sir. You were the adamant defender that Duke would be okay.
I mean, so that was their second worst offensive game of the season. It was their third worst defensive game of the season. So, not exactly like the bright beacon that you would hope for if you were someone wanting Duke to kind of stand out. But, at the end of the day, like, it's not probably super surprising that they didn't have a great offensive game. I mean, Denver is still the number one defense in the country from an adjusted efficiency perspective. So, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely, now I think the question becomes like, Duke's defense between February and March has gotten better. Their offense has kind of ticked down a little bit, and their face-off win rates ticked down a little bit. So, there was definitely a survive type game for them, and probably of all the games they played, it was certainly the one that they had the lowest kind of win probability coming in. So, it's I guess it's funny because now is Denver a quality win? I mean, I'm sure people would say no, but Duke's 8-0.
I mean, Denver's schedule. So let's look at who they've lost to. They've lost to Cornell, Ohio State, Syracuse, and Duke. So those are who's who on your schedule there. So let's take a look just really quick. This is their schedule. They have beat Cleveland State, Utah, Michigan. I mean, those aren't necessarily quality wins. If you want to, I mean, Utah's in there, but Utah just lost this weekend to UVA as well. So Yeah, this is an interesting one. The story's almost flipped now. Duke on a roll, but Denver, a highly
Yeah.
rated team here, has not really beat a quad one, if that's what we're going to call it, a quad one opponent here in this season. But yeah, I mean, we can look into a little bit of what happened in this game. I will say I turned it on to start, and it looked like Denver was gonna pull away early. I think
Yeah.
it was like 2-0, 3-0. I'm trying to remember now. It was obviously a low-scoring game, but I thought even about texting you, Zach. I was like,
Yeah.
here it comes. Here it is. Duke is the pretender. But then Duke obviously stormed back. It was 4-0 Denver in the first quarter. That's what I'm looking at right now. But a 7-0 second quarter for Duke led the way for them.
Yeah, I mean, that win probability for Duke at the end of quarter one was ticked down to about 35%. So it was not a good first period for them. But the second quarter, like you said, that was all it was needed.
All right, Max Sloat and Ben Johnston. I got to make sure I give a shout out. I wish I knew his name, but in the beginning of this game, Ben Johnston, and to a certain extent, he got completely. I mean, he has 2 points. Right,
Yeah.
Ben Johnston here. The defender whoever was guarding Ben Johnston did an absolutely phenomenal job. He's even bigger than Ben Johnston,
Yeah.
which is hard to find. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just kind of going through the recap a little bit to see if what flipped. And honestly, it does look like it was the Duke defense that was really the big. I think Denver shot 57% in the first quarter. It looks like scored on half their goals, and then after in the final 3 quarters they shot 14%. So. And I do think it's kind of, it looks like there was some transition, right? Because Denver in the first quarter, they were shooting quick, right? They 24 seconds on average for their first shot of a possession. After that, in the second half, it was 36 seconds, right? And so, you just imagine that was probably one of those things that Duke just kind of maybe did a little bit of a better job getting back in transition and not allowing those early looks. And that was the key. Once they did that, Denver wasn't really able to grind out possessions like that.
Yeah, when it's all said and done, the goalie here for Duke, Patrick Jamison, had a 22% save percentage. You don't see that happen often and win a game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a team effort there, especially going down early. But, yeah, 7-0 second quarter. And Max Sloat and Ben Johnston, again, those are the guys. Those are Duke's guys. I think they got shut down a little bit early, but looked like a team effort here across the board when you talk about an 8-7 victory.
Right.
All right, we are moving into the rest of the schedule here. The Inside Lacrosse poll here coming out maybe an hour ago, so apologies about starting just a little bit late. But we had Notre Dame unmoved at number 1, Richmond beating UMass here at 2. Let me make sure I get the right graphic up here. So, I mean, we could touch on a little bit of both of those teams. They have a matchup upcoming. There's a little bit of drama around the Richmond Notre Dame game. There's still nothing has been made public about whether this game is being streamed or put out. So I'm not going to kind of jump the gun on this at all, but there is a little bit of a scheduling / media mishap here of not having a number 1, number 2 matchup being played. Zach, do you have anything to say about Notre Dame or Richmond? I don't have anything really for Richmond. They kind of beat the snot out of UMass. Notre Dame being off.
There's such an interest. I think that there's like a very interesting seeding thing, right? If you think about like bracketology right now and where things stand, and think about a team like Richmond.
I saw this.
Richmond,
I know what you're about
Carolina.
to say.
It's like and this is I guess it goes back to like selection criteria and stuff. Because I was talking to one of the bracketologist guys, Mark Hart, and he was saying that like the last time that the selection committee didn't have the number 1 RPI team as the top seed was like very, very long ago. But it's tricky because then you look at like Hughes versus Richmond, and like I think Hughes has a better resume right now, but Richmond has that number 1 RPI spot, which again they're not going to hold on to because of A10 conference games. But it's just I feel like that was an interesting one where you got Hughes as the number 2 RPI, but their resume ranks first, and so I'm not in the room. I'm not a seed. I'm not a bracketologist, but the idea of Richmond or Notre Dame on the top line right now seems a little suspect to me.
I think the post that you put out was basically saying that Notre Dame, the number 1 team in the land, pretty much unanimously when it comes to the media polls for the most part. I don't know how many votes Richmond is receiving right now. You were basically saying Notre Dame might not be, if the selection happened today, they would not be the number 1 seed, which again, you were right on the Duke piece. I gotta cede to you this week because you were right on the Duke piece. I mean, to think that Notre Dame, which again, unanimous number 1 media for the most part, would not be a number 1 seed in the tournament is you're stepping out on the ledge there.
I mean, I think the thing with them right now is their schedule is like mid-majory right now, right? They've got 6 victories. Their best RPI win is Georgetown. They only have 2 top 20 wins. Maryland right now is 22nd. I mean, none of the teams that they beat are really in that upper echelon. And I just, when you think about like how the committee has tended to think about wins and how they, compare everybody's top wins and that sort of thing, like, it's just, I mean, and again, I mean, a little bit is premature because they're going to have tons of chances to get great victories. But right now, I mean, their resume is a little light. And I think it does go back to the idea, like the media poll is very different than the committee room, The nice thing is those things tend to converge over the course of the season. So once we get closer to Selection Sunday, but I always just like to point these things out because I think there is a misperception that like the committee just goes by RPI to make their selections, and we know that's not the case for the sort of the last in, first out. To the extent that it is the case for seeding, it might be a different conversation, but. Yeah, I mean, it's just always good to point out like Notre Dame, surely number 1 team in the country, surely they'd be the number 1 seed. But like if you look at resume wise, like they just don't stack up to the teams like Syracuse, Princeton, UNC.
Who's your number 1 right now?
Q's.
Well, Q's is your number 1.
We're talking about like media poll style, like
yeah,
ranking. Yeah, I've got Notre Dame as number 1.
Okay,
but RPI, the way that RPI is used by the committee is not necessarily very kind to them.
Okay. All right. That'll be something to track as we go through. We are going to talk some Big Ten special. Appreciate you guys joining us live. If you're here afterwards, we see you. We know you got things to be doing during the day. You can't always hop onto the YouTube stream here at 11:30 on a Monday. I totally get it. I appreciate you guys joining. If you could leave a like to support me and Zach. You got some comments, by the way, Zach, on Instagram. I don't know if I tagged you on that, but there were some flowers thrown your way about the show and about what we're doing on Monday. So again, if you're here live, leave some comments. If you're here afterwards, we see you guys. Let's go into another game here before we hop into some of this Big Ten piece. We've got UNC Army. That was probably, I don't want to say it was the game of the week. Might be. I know you had way more. But this was a fantastic one. I love Army. Again, Sean Byrne, a friend of the channel. UNC is always a fun one. So UNC Army, let's go.
Trying to figure out, not just this week, but for the past 2 years, how to crack that. There's the cut and the score for Petramala. To this point, 1 apiece. 30 seconds to go in the quarter. Quick feed inside on the doorstep again. The opportunity to get a taste, because if not, over the course of the game, it's only going to get worse. And they finally stop the momentum for Army and earn possession.
All right, shooting clinic there early, but I guess, I mean, this was a close one throughout. We have North Carolina 12-11 over Army. The normal cast of characters here for Army: Hill Plunkett, Evan Plunkett, Gunnar Fellows, in that order, all had 3 points apiece. We saw Owen Duffy only with 3. He was 0 goals, 3 assists. Dom had 2 goals, 1 assist there. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of goals actually for Army to give up. Obviously, this is one of the tougher opponents in the land, but 12 goals given up to UNC here. The UNC pulling it off 12-11.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this goes down as their 4th best defensive performance for Army, right? Just given how good Carolina's offense is. So it's, definitely they played well. It's tough for Army because they're sitting here in this situation where they've got 3 losses and they're all pretty close games, and it would be a very different situation if they were they had maybe only dropped that BU game. But it's tough to see how Army's path to the tournament is, assuming they don't win the AQ at this point.
Yeah, I think we're there. We're sitting squarely in that kind of timeline where they have to win.
I mean, if they get to 12 wins, that you'd imagine they'll have a pretty good shot. But like at this point, I mean, yeah, like how will they get to 12 victories before the end of the season? I mean, that's 6 more. They'd have to win out and then get at least 1 Patriot League game. And at that point, you're sitting there saying, okay, maybe they've got a shot. But I mean, the way that they've gone the last couple of weeks, And again, like, it's not that they necessarily played poorly. It's just they didn't win those games, and now it's a very, very narrow path.
Yeah, especially when you talk about I don't know what the Patriot League looks like as far as RPI, but it's not, you don't have that ACC or Ivy League kind of backdrop where you can really find some super quality wins. There's some good teams in here, but not like that. Yeah, I mean, what did this do to Brady Wambach's efficiency? 5-ish%, I believe. Let me see. Let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, 78%. Apologies, Brady. I gave you 4 or 5% there. But yeah, 78% here. Obviously a big story, but what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's, he's the number one. When I do the ELO ratings for face-off guys, it's that sort of an opponent adjusted win rate. And he's kind of solidified himself as that number one guy. So it's nothing but dominance for him. And it's, it does make it tough because you look at their games, and it's one of those things where when they were plus 12 possessions against Army, Army actually outplayed them in terms of per possession efficiency, but it's just hard when you've got 12 more possessions than your opponent.
Zach, can you pull up the specialist one? I think we have the efficiency matrix up here, which I love to see Ohio State all the way up and top and to the left. That's amazing. Like the adjusted offensive efficiency being that low, but the I mean, what would these guys be with Bobby Van Buren is insane. Or maybe they're better without him. Is it weird to say that? I don't know.
Well, I think at this point, the question becomes like, could he play offense? All right, that's for national, right? Okay. And you've got UNC sitting down there as the top adjusted face-off unit in the country. So it's, again, I always like to think of these in sort of those tiers. I should probably put some lines on here, the diagonal line.
Yeah, yep.
It's Denver, Princeton, Ohio State, and Penn that you'd sort of have in that sort of upper echelon for the specialists. And UNC's almost there, right? If they got a little more out of Marcus and Cage, like they'd probably tick up into that top tier. But yeah, so far it's those four, and then a bunch of strong teams there following them up.
All right, last one I want to touch on before we switch into Big Ten mode here is Harvard and Dartmouth. Harvard playing a pretty close game to Dartmouth. I mean, we know Dartmouth coached well. Everyone loves a little Kerwin action. So we're going to play this real quick, come back to Harvard-Dartmouth.
Across the zone for Art. Cobry from X tucks it in. His fourth of the game gives Harvard insurance with 2:09 to go.
That was a big-time goal for the...
All right, Harvard, again, winning this one, but it was close. We had a close game here. I don't think they were expecting it to be that close. Harvard's been extremely dominant on both sides of the ball. 17 points scored by that phenomenal offense, but Dartmouth scoring 14 of their own. And I think Dartmouth had a lead at half in this one as well. Yeah. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've got a good and a bad for Harvard, right? Like, this was easily their worst defensive game of the season. They were at the previous worst was Marquette, 32% defensive efficiency. This one, they were 37. So that's not great. But, we talked, I think, last week about how their face-off unit had just been ticking down over their past three. They were up above 50%, almost 60% adjusted in their first couple games. Last three games really fell off a cliff. And against Penn, they were lucky to win that because they were minus 18 possessions. This one, they were back up to 51% on an adjusted basis. So I don't know if that was, again, it's hard to, I don't know if that was personnel or if it was just tactics or what, but they kind of righted the ship from a possessions perspective. And, so again, choose your own adventure, right? Do you look at that and say, wow, really, really bad defensive performance from them relative to what we'd seen? Or do you say, hey, they righted the ship on faceoffs, and that's a positive going forward?
Yeah, shout out to Alex Jesse for Dartmouth having 5 points here in this matchup. I mean, the points were relatively spread around. Thomas Power with 4, Stu Gates with 4. This is all for Dartmouth. And then, Spidell didn't do that well. He had 2 goals, 1 assist here. You're talking 17 points. You'd think you'd get more from that. But they have, again, such a deep offense that it doesn't matter. I mean, you got guys that are scoring all over the place for this team. Princeton comes to mind when you think about the balance of that team as well. Just a great overall team that coach has been able to assemble here.
It's funny with Harvard. I was a little surprised by this because I was looking at their like rankings over the past couple of years, and Byrne has such a reputation for defense, right? But like, I mean, this year they're 11th in defensive efficiency, but like the past 3 seasons they've been in the 30s. Whereas like the offense is what's really driven the train there. Like they finished 2023 in 35th as the 35th best offense. Last year 10th, 2025 4th. This year they're first, right? So I just had this perception that was like, oh, the offense is catching up to the defense because he's got that reputation as a sort of defensive wizard. But that's really not actually kind of the case at all. I mean, and not to say he's not a great defensive coach, just that their numbers have not been very good on the defensive side.
Harvard has Boston, U, and North Carolina this week. So I love the double up of the schedule. It gives us some midweek action, or at least a Sunday game mixed in there. I do like seeing that stuff. And it prepares them for late in the season. As Quinn Kesnick always likes to say, you got to prep yourself if you want to be playing in that playoff time frame. You're going to play a lot of games in a very short amount of time. So to prep yourself kind of mid-season is the way to go. All right, we've got a former Big East competition here. A lot was made of Syracuse and Georgetown here on Sunday, being Big East, formerly Big East rivals. Now, obviously, that landscape has changed as much of just college sports in general has changed from those 90s in early 2000s matchups, 80s even. Also, I want to talk about Kevin Warren's get up, man. He had a basketball warm up on to in the entirety of that game. But let's touch on another conference here, Big Ten. But before we make to that Syracuse Georgetown tilt, we wanted to kind of hone in on what is kind of an eclectic conference here. So let's have Zack take the honors here. But let's touch on a little bit Big Ten action and what that looks like on the bubble, AQ, and also at large if we get some.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting. I do think of all the leagues, it's kind of on the knife edge a little bit, right? Like you look at the bottom 3 conferences here, and like the chance of a Big East team getting in as an at-large is fading quickly. Patriot League took a big hit with Army losing and BU losing to Colgate. A10 is Richmond, and then St. Joe's is still kind of kicking there. Ivy, we feel pretty good at this point. They're going to have 3, and the ACC is looking pretty strong for 4. So then the Big Ten is sort of that team is like, is it possible that they end up with 2? Could a Hopkins or Maryland or Rutgers kind of sneak in there and kind of be one of the teams that we do see in the field, come Sunday? And I love this graphic because all season it's sort of been more and more and more the Big Ten teams are the ones that are drifting up to the top of this graphic, meaning like it's going to be Big Ten teams on the bubble. We could easily see a situation where the Big Ten is all of the last 2 in, first 2 out. And so, it does feel like Ohio State and Penn State are sort of getting to the point where they can feel not good, but like feel like they've got a pretty good shot of being there.
Is the Big Ten going to cannibalize itself? I mean, they all have to play each other. Is it just like the winners take all kind of scenario here that you could see?
Yeah, I mean, again, like we're not. I don't see. It's really hard to envision something where the Big Ten gets 4 in. So I don't think you could imagine a situation where like, if Michigan goes on a run or Rutgers goes on a run and gives Hopkins and Maryland a couple losses, I would imagine that probably would reduce their percentage. But presumably if Hopkins and Maryland can kind of take care of Rutgers and Michigan, then I don't think it's necessarily cannibalization, because that's kind of how they get to 3, and then they just need to avoid some bid beef scenarios. But I think the chance that they get 3 teams in goes up a lot if Rutgers and Michigan lose a lot of games the rest of the way.
Gotcha. Okay. Hopkins, I got to give a shout out to Peter Milliman, man. They moved up to number 11 in the Inside Lacrosse media poll. That's really strong for a team that has been very, very up and down, and I would say more down in the last even decade.
Yeah.
So seeing Hopkins like almost break into this top 10, they've got a plethora of offensive talent. It's fun to watch that team play. I think we were kind of making that assumption about Syracuse and UNC, and maybe some people were talking about Notre Dame and Cornell, but Hopkins is loaded on the offensive side. What do they look like from like an offensive versus defensively balanced team? Like, where does that balance lie with them?
Yeah, so they're 11th on offense and they're 16th on defense, right? So they're pretty balanced as far as what's driving that bus. face-off unit's the one that's kind of dragging them down a bit. They're only at their 36 nationally as far as the face-off unit. But the positive is like their offense has been ticking up and their defense has been ticking up too in March. Like they were sort of more of like fine in February, and in March over their three games, they're like about almost 4 percentage points better on offense and about 2 on defense. So, they're pretty balanced, and both sides of the ball have been kind of seeing some improvement recently.
I know we've covered this a bunch. Obviously, we've done the Lax Elo bracketology pretty much every week since the inception. Even when people were like, "What the heck? It's week 1. We're doing bracketology." Give me a recap here. The work to do section, does that include? Are you like, when I see St. Joe's on this, is that more so for the at large, or is that for?
This is all at large. I used to have it where it was like, because you'd end up with teams where they were really strong chance to win their league, and they'd end up in the likely in bucket because there was like 70% chance to win their AQ.
And then
I changed this around, so this is only related to like, what are the chances you get in, assuming you don't win an AQ, right? So yeah, I mean, St. Joe's, honestly, like they don't have a terrible resume, and they've got some opportunities to improve it down the stretch. So they're still alive. I mean, if they can kind of go and maybe win out and maybe lose a championship game to Richmond, like there's definitely a chance they could have an at-large worthy resume.
Okay, Hopkins taking down Michigan pretty handily here. It was 8-2 at half. Hunter Chalvet, Matt Collison, those are the guys there on the Hopkins side of things. I like to see Matt Collison start this offense. I talked with Quint Kesnick on the podcast, The Ride, about this. He was of that similar ilk when, talking about, that's a PLL level player you have. And obviously Hunter Chalvet, one of the best shooters and one of the best shooting strokes in college lacrosse right now.
Don't sleep on Rawson too. I mean, so when I look at like Big Ten sort of like best efficiency players between efficiency and production, Collison and Rawson are both sort of what you'd call first team Big Ten for efficiency. Chalvet actually is the second team guy.
Do we have that graphic? The first team, second team type? No. Okay.
I can pop up my cool command prompt terminal window if you want to see the code for it.
No, read that for us like the Matrix, and tell us what the first team kind of looks like, or second team.
So this is basically that same idea that we talk about with the efficient frontier, right? That trade-off between efficiency and production. So trying to understand, who kind of meets both of those criteria. And so there's 6 guys in the Big Ten that you'd call sort of first team efficiency players. It's Rawson, Collison from Hopkins, Kurdla from Rutgers, Leo Johnson at Maryland, and then Ian Tuono from Penn State, and Lehman from Penn State. So those are the 6 guys that you'd sort of look at and say first team. Lehman is the one that he stands out a little bit. Like he's got the lowest efficiency of that group. But when you factor in the fact that Penn State, the defenses they've played collectively are the toughest that any Big Ten team has played, he still kind of sneaks into that group just based on the fact that when you account for his level of production and the fact they played strong defenses and the fact that he's been fairly efficient, 63rd percentile, he ticks in there too. Then the funny thing about the Frontier is there's not necessarily a second team. In this case, there's one player on the second team Big Ten all efficiency team, and that's Chalvet from Hopkins, as you mentioned. The only guy that's been better than him is Leo Johnson as far as all 3 of those categories.
Gotcha.
So those are the 7 guys that you'd sit there and say, those are the ones that have had the best offensive season.
All right. We're gonna move into a Big Ten matchup here. For obviously, some of the stronger teams, the ones that were in the likely in category. Penn State taking on Maryland, which is having a very interesting season. To their standard, probably one of the worst starts to a season that you've seen out of the Terps in quite some time.
Mental adjustment, significant strides taken. Quick stick inside, on the way down. Hobbs delivers. Hawkins keeping Maryland at bay on one end leads to a sweet goal by Mac Hobbs, 14 in white. This is not bad defense by the Maryland Terrapins. And actually, when Lehman makes the feed, I'm kind of like, that's a little Drew Aller throwing into coverage. But look at Hobbs. Catches it, identifies where he's going to put it, and then flicks it top shelf. Great wrist strength. Beautiful.
All right, that is Penn State taking down Maryland. Maryland now with 4 losses here in the last, I would say, month, maybe 4 weeks essentially. Yeah. So they fall 10-6. Offense not getting it done here for them. Eric Spanos with 0, big old goose egg. Leo Johnson with 3, AJ Larkin with 2, and Urkso with 1 here to lead Maryland. Obviously, Penn State getting the victory. Tell me about it, man. They're ranked 12th. A 4-loss Maryland team is ranked 12th. That maybe says more about the rest of the competition and where we're at from a loss standpoint. When you look at everyone beyond them, you still see a ton of losses. Denver right behind Maryland at 4-4, right? So maybe more to do with some of the other guys having losses, but tell me about them.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it was, they're at the point now, like if I look at their tournament profile, they're about a coin flip to get in, and that might be high just given the way that they've played in recent games. But it was, it's tough. And if this was for the Terps, like this is actually a really strong defensive performance. I mean, this was one of their best games. Only against Notre Dame did they have a better defensive efficiency. But then the flip side is this was just, you're starting to think like the wheels kind of fell off the offense. This is their worst offensive game of the season, even accounting for who they went up against. And, it's tough. And, it's always hard to feel like you're calling out a guy. Like their highest play share player is Urksa, and he's in the 33rd percentile for efficiency this year. And it's just, Stovall looks so good against Syracuse in that game. It's just like everybody was having a hard time kind of handling him, and he's in the 23rd percentile. So, it's just it's no idea why these players have kind of dropped off. But when you look at a guy like Urksa, from a year-over-year perspective, he was well, actually he's actually kind of ticked up a little bit even compared to where he was 2 years ago. So it's kind of hard to say what's going on, but it just doesn't feel like that offense has it figured out.
Yeah. I don't want to put too much on Spanos, man. He's gotten hurt. He's had some issues. The issue is you're wearing the number 1. That's the number 22 for Q's. You're the guy. You're supposed to be the guy, and it's just been a rough season, injuries or otherwise. The goalie play for Penn State, it's pretty good. Preston Hawkins 70% in an area where people were like, hey, the goalie play might be what kind of slows him down, giving 70%. They also kind of won the face-off battle there today or the other day. But, yeah, what can you say? Penn State getting it done.
You could, for Spanos, going back to that for a second, like it's you can see it in the numbers. Like I have like a game rating for, that's like a combination of efficiency and production for each, for each game an individual player plays. And so Loyola, 90, Syracuse 80, Princeton 80. These are all like out of 100. So the first 3 games he had it, right? Gets injured, tries to come back against Penn State, 35, right? So it's you look at that and it's just so clear that the injury has sapped something from him. And it'll be interesting, right? Because we talked about Maryland, like they've got their numbers are such that they've got the opportunities to win some games over the rest of the season that their tournament chances are not dead, right? If they can kind of get hot, there's no reason they can't be there as an at-large if they don't win the Big Ten. But I think that 35 is the real question, right? Is he going to be able to get back to where he was in the start of the season? Because I think a lot of stuff could probably get easier for those other guys too if he's able to be, back at full health. And so, that I think that's the biggest question. Can he get back up into those 80-90 game rating ranges going forward?
All right, we're going to take a look at some other games here. Q's playing 2 games and winning both over the last week, so I give them the win of the weekend. I know you like to do what was the best win of the weekend. Well, taking down both Denver and Georgetown here in a 7-day span, probably even less actually, probably like a 5-day span when you think about it. That's going to get them, for me, the game of the week from just taking down 2 ranked opponents. So shout out the Qs, man. These guys have been under the microscope. This is the year. Obviously, I don't want to get into that debate but they're showing extremely well, at least this week.
On. Bowen to Leo. Space and scores. Just a rocket from Michael Leo. When this Syracuse offense is humming, it is close to impossible to stop, especially when it can get things done in transition.
Syracuse taking advantage of the transition that they're able to get. This time it's Riley Figueres. I don't think people at home realize how tough this pass is right here that he's going to make to Dante Bowen. Nice handle. They all just put the ball right on the ear. Michael Leo, the beneficiary, able to just catch that one. Great low to high, goes stick side high.
All right, 18-12. Coach Warren is not going to like that final line. 18-12 in the Dome. Q's is back. They're back, playing in front of the home fans. It's a different team, whether that is a good thing or not. Clearly, they're super dominant when they're playing in front of their home fans in Syracuse, New York. Georgetown falls to 3-4, scoring 12, but letting in again at 18. The cast of characters on both sides pretty standard. You had Joey Spallina, Michael Leo, Finn Thompson for the Q's, and then you had the two Connor brothers and Ransom with 3 points. So Liam Connor leading with 7, Rory with 4, and then Ransom with 3. Zach, take me through this game, sir. What did it look like from your end?
Yeah, I mean, it was a game that they just dominated from an efficiency perspective. I mean, they didn't really control faceoffs as all that much. But I mean, they scored on 42% of their possessions. Georgetown was at 29%. So it was an impressive game. And I mean, Georgetown's offense is not a bad unit, but their defense is not a bad unit either. But like the Syracuse offense, that was easily the worst defensive performance for Georgetown this year. So yeah, definitely a strong game for the Qs.
Look, I'm not going to give them too much of a hard time. It is hard to play in that environment, but it just looked like you could feel the wave for Syracuse starting to build, and it just became too much. Like the pressure just built up in the middle of the field for Qs, and that's really where they dominated. I mean, other than kind of everywhere, I just felt that the game got broken wide open in the middle of the field in somewhere around that second quarter, that 8-point second quarter. So big ups to them. I mean, just Georgetown's had a rough go of it. Have they beat a quad 1 team this year? Let me see. Let's jump in.
I don't know if Penn might qualify. Probably not. But yeah, okay. So they've not. I mean, but again, that's always the Georgetown question, right? It's for better or for worse. They should win the Big East, right? So it's not. Sure. I don't know. It's tough because you'd love the Big East to be competitive and start to say, hey, maybe they could be an at-large type conference. But I think this year it's not in the cards.
Who's closest in RPI to them in the Big East?
Oh, in the Big East specifically, yeah. So Georgetown's number 10. Let's see. Next would be Denver at 17.
Okay. I mean, that's not a gimme. That is a total toss-up in my opinion of who's going to win that game. If they play tomorrow, we'll see. They actually play here this week, so that will be a good time to see that.
Yeah, Denver. We've got Laxville's got Georgetown 61% to win that game, so it's definitely that's pretty close to toss-up territory for sure.
All right, we do have this graphic up on screen. Which win was the best? I'll let you answer this one again. Penn State over Maryland, Cornell over Princeton, NJIT over Binghamton, Q's over Georgetown, or Colgate over Boston. That Colgate win's pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. That one, just based on how BU was kind of riding high, that one feels almost more of a letdown. Sorry, Colgate, but that one feels like more of a letdown for BU than a strong result for Colgate. I don't know. I think I feel like Cornell. I'd go with either Cornell or NJIT on this one. I think I was reading like this is the first NJIT 1-0 conference record ever, maybe. So hey, it's a program that's taken some steps, and I think Cornell is one that people love to write Cornell off.
Yeah.
I think, and look, this is not a team that like the ELO. When I looked at like the previews and the numbers for the win probabilities, like compared to the public perception, like Cornell was the pick. I think Princeton was still favored, but hey, good for Cornell showing some spunk, and it's like that just makes the Ivy League a little bit more interesting, I think.
Yeah, that public perception you're talking about with Cornell is super interesting. It's almost like the CJ Kirst hangover.
Yeah.
Like people are just saying, well, you lost Kirst, so there's going to be some type of fallout. But the culture's obviously great with Busick, and there's just, and
this is not the first time this has happened. I remember a couple years ago after they lost Jeff Teat, like I did my preseason win totals number for everybody, and one of the I will not be named media personality emailed me. I was like, that's crazy to have Cornell at that number because they lost Jeff Teat, right? And they went to the Final Four, and it's like, I think, and I don't know if it's culture. I don't know if it's just next man up. And who knows, maybe they lose the rest of their games this year, but I just think there's a general, players are very important, but programs are probably more important in college lacrosse. And so when you've got a program that produces these players, it's not as if the players leave and take all of that with them.
It's a great quote, man. I think that might be, I haven't done any clips for the show. It's a little bit harder to kind of input, but that might be a clip there. It might be clip worthy. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We are about, we got 45 minutes in. We're about 15 minutes left in today's show. You guys, I appreciate the support. If you're here, give us a like, man. Definitely helps get it out to as many people as possible. If you're here afterwards, same thing. Appreciate you guys. All right, we've got to move our way through this. Ohio State, me and Zack early in this season, we were kind of debating what's going to happen with Ohio State without Van Buren. It's become kind of a running joke because somehow they are better without Bobby Van Buren, only allowing 5 in this game. Is it 5 or 6? Only allowing 5 to Rutgers here. So we're going to cover this game.
And Jack Oldman has the face-off win for the Buckeyes. Here comes Shaw. Chance to go quick. Marinier ends it for the Buckeyes! One of the nation's top snipers, Alex Marinier, has had a quiet one, but finishes loudly. 6-5 Buckeyes. And Ohio State's first lead of the game comes at the end of it.
Ralph, we don't see goals scored in large amounts of time on this field today.
I have to choose my words carefully here. The worst thing about the Big Ten is that you can't watch the Big Ten. I'm not going to pay for Big Ten Plus, and yet I feel like all of the Big Ten teams have had some really great moments here in this season. Obviously, there are some great teams involved, and yet behind the paywall, not having any on the regular Big Ten network. Can we get any games on the Big Ten network? It's all Big Ten Plus. So, I think we got one today for the ACC, switching gears. We have a game on the ACC network, not ACC Network Plus, not anything like that, actually on TV. So it'll be interesting to watch that one today. I believe that's a UVA game. Let me make sure I'm on that for you guys.
UVA Dartmouth.
Yeah, which should be a good game based on the game that Dartmouth just gave Harvard. But anyways, I'm not going to go into a grind my gears segment. But it's just tough when I see a game finish in the fastest overtime possible, and we don't get to watch it unless you want to pay an absorbent amount to Big Ten Plus. But anyways, Zach, sorry, go ahead.
I'll have to look this up. Ohio State has won their past 2 games, scoring 12 goals, not per game, 12 goals total. That's crazy to have 2 consecutive games where they've allowed 5 and 4 goals to Denver and Rutgers. We're not talking about the little sisters of the blind here. Their defense, they've averaged about 10% defensive efficiency in the last 2 games. 10%. That's an absurd number.
I'm foaming at the mouth right now as a defensive coordinator to watch these guys play a full game. I want to see what, it has to be, Cullen Brown obviously is a really good defender, and he stepped in magnificently, apparently. I'm talking in in the ether right now because I can't I'm guessing that this is what is happening basically because I haven't been able to watch them. Cullen Brown playing extremely well, but what I'm guessing is, other than great team defense, is they have phenomenal short stick defenders. That the only way that I could see these stat lines is that you just can't be attacked anywhere. That's what I'm guessing I'm going to see when it comes to that first game for Ohio State. Other than phenomenal defense, it's going to be, wow, Colin Brown looks like a star, and they have the best short sticks in the country. But again, it's a guess. So that's where I'm at.
It's one. I mean, when I look at their defensive numbers, like one thing that's interesting is they've allowed 52% of the goals they've allowed were assisted. And so, but they're second in terms of shooting percentage. They're third in terms of adjusted or on goal shooting percentage. They're 12th in terms of shot on goal rate. They've turned teams over at the highest rate in the country. I just look at, like there's not a lot of weaknesses there. And the reason I bring up the assist rate is I always think that's an interesting kind of counterpoint to some sort of observations about defenses. Like, does a team require a bunch of passes and moving the defense to create goals? And it does look like that's sort of the case with Ohio State. And so, the question then is like, if you can't create that movement, you're not going to score. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing with them is like, it's not as if you can just say, okay, we don't have anybody that can run past their defenders. We aren't good. No team is good enough except 22 Maryland to like rely on passing to create offense to that degree. And so it's just like, tails, Ohio State doesn't allow you to score. Heads, Ohio State doesn't allow you to score.
These stat lines when we cover these defensive games, which I made this point, I think with you, and I also talked about it with Quint, of how it feels like a defensive laden season. He was kind of chalking it up to maybe some like weather was something he was talking about, like early season weather and all this stuff, but it feels like a defensive heavy season. You don't see a lot of 17 to 15s like we saw with Harvard and Dartmouth. You see a good amount of like 6-5 games. I don't remember seeing a ton of these games, but it's probably just recency bias. Yeah. But 6-5, your top scorer is scoring 2 points on both sides. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I wonder too if there's some degree of like Rutgers is coming into this game expecting it to be low scoring, expecting every possession to be really critical. And I always wonder if there's a psychological element that just makes for worse offense when you are sitting there thinking, okay, if we can get a goal in this possession, like that's huge for the game.
Yeah.
Whereas like maybe you're playing more free if it's like, look, this possession is one of many, and and we'll have another shot at it. But like I feel like in a game you expect to be low scoring, is there some sort of like tension that creeps in that makes it tougher for offenses?
Yeah. The most goals they've allowed this season are to Air Force in Georgetown. That's crazy. They lost to Notre Dame. I mean, they're playing a brand of defense that is going to get them very far. Let's just put it that way. They've got Penn State, Maryland, Hopkins, and Michigan to round out their season, basically. So we're getting down to it before tournament play. It's kind of crazy how quickly this moment has come, but every season feels like this. You're kind of like awaiting week one. Feels like forever. You got to like watch indoor lacrosse. Not that I'm saying that's a bad thing. I love indoor lacrosse. I still watch it right now, but it just feels like you're so lacrosse starved, and then you're 3/4 of the way through the season. It's crazy.
One thing on that Penn State Ohio State game, that one has huge seeding implications for the NCAA tournament. I ran the simulations, and right now Ohio State's about 40% to get a home game. Penn State's about 34%. If Ohio State wins, that number jumps up to 62. If Penn State wins, their number jumps up to 52. So whoever wins that game is looking like they're going to have an inside track at one of those home games, which for a Big Ten that's maybe a little down this year, they may only get one. So whoever wins that game has a pretty good shot at getting one of them.
Is there any other major game this week that has any of those implications?
Well, I mean, there's quite a few games that are kind of funny when you look at like the knock-on effects, like Syracuse Duke. There's a lot of teams that are hoping Syracuse wins that game. Ohio State Penn State's a little bit different, right? Like Georgetown, Ohio State are rooting for, Hopkins and Georgetown are rooting for Ohio State. Maryland's looking for Penn. In terms of like the own team knock-on effects, Harvard is kind of an interesting one, right? They're right now like obviously looking very good for a bid. But if Harvard wins, their chance of having a home game jumps up to 74. It's only 40% if they lose that one. So that's a pretty big one in terms of Ivy League knock-on effects.
Okay, last game we've got to touch on. We could have touched on the Yale Penn game. Do you have anything for the Yale Penn piece? I have another team that I've obviously have affection for.
I mean, big win for Penn, right? They've definitely got the inside track on that 4th Ivy League spot now. So in their tournament, and Yale's going to have to really fight back if they want to be in the postseason.
Okay, we've given this team a tough time on the show, even the podcast. So we're going to let them have their flowers today.
And he'll fire high, and he'll score again. 6 goals for Truett Sunderland, rolling on offense. That was a tough angle there, and he found the corner of the net in front of Letskold. And all of a sudden, Virginia's lead is 15-9 over Utah.
All right, this had an interesting flair to it. They played in UVA Stadium in run-up to national championship and tournament weekend, which was cool to see. I mean, being able to be in that stadium, usually we're looking at Klockner, and they were in that big old stadium getting prepped for the tournament. But your thoughts on UVA Utah here?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. What do you learn from that? Hard to say. It's a game you'd expect them to win, but they did. So that's what you're looking for. When I look at, we talked about the efficiency, first team, second team. UVA, like that offense is actually a very good offense, and they've got 2 guys, Truett Sunderland and Brendan Millen, that are sort of on that second team all efficiency list. And I think Sunderland actually was one of the sort of offensive games of the week, with an 89th percentile efficiency and a 99th percentile production number. So early in the year, it was the Millens that were sort of driving it, but Sunderland has sort of stepped up as that third option, and been very efficient doing it.
They need that. They absolutely need that. And so for 1 week, they're off the hot seat a little bit, but they do have a game tonight against Dartmouth. That will be a good one. That's in Charlottesville. I wonder if they're going to play the rest of the season on that field, but probably not. They were probably testing that there and then playing on Klockner for the remainder. But they got a game against Dartmouth tonight on the ACC network on public television. Let's go. All right. We are pretty much through the top 25 and some of the games here. Zach, did you have any other game this weekend that you maybe wanted to touch on that we didn't give enough love to? Sacred Heart still undefeated, by the way.
Yeah, and I love. It's funny whenever I do my rankings, I feel like I get so much more arguments from people about like the like 11 to 20. No one really is really complains much about the top, but like Sacred Heart is such a divisive team, and like people hate that they're this high, but like undefeated. Like when you look at the numbers, like their resume is good. It's up with these other teams. I mean, like
LIU ahead of Maryland. Let's go.
We're getting who'd have thought? But, I like what I feel like that's people often use that 20 spot to like reward a team, but that's why I like doing the rankings this way and having the strength of record in there, because like you win all your games, like it's hard to do.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I feel you there. JJ Pro saying credit to Utah for keeping it close to the middle of the third. I feel like Utah was having a better season than UVA, but maybe again it's just all this bias and negativity maybe around some of the things that have happened in Charlottesville with not winning any quad one games. So I thought Utah would be a really tough game for them. It's not like they're a giveaway game by any means, but yeah, JJ, appreciate that comment.
I mean, I think with Utah and Virginia, like the trend lines are what drives that, because if you think about like relative to expectations, Utah's been kind of okay this year. Like they had that big win against Delaware. Their ELO ratings up 67 points this season. Virginia is basically exactly the same team they were at the end of last year. Their ELO rating is not budged. Essentially, they're at the exact same number they were starting the season. So, I think that's probably where some of that comes from.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point, and one that you make, or I guess you should make often, man. You make a lot of great points. So let's talk efficiency frontier here. We got 4 names. Yeah, that's a relatively small list.
I know, which I kind of like. It's tough when you got 15 names. I mean, on the flip side, like great for all 15 of those guys, but it's a little easier to kind of wrap your head around when it's a smaller list. So, yeah, Driggs from Air Force against Providence, big win for the Falcons, and another kind of ding for the Big East. But Driggs was it was 8 points, only 1 turnover. Druin for Colgate was the guy that really drove that upset over the Terriers. And this is again that idea of like maybe this is the counterpoint, but like Colgate lost those 2 guys, and so you look at that and say, okay, the Connors are gone, Colgate's gone. But they've had a rough start, but things seem maybe this is things kind of clicking into place for them. And Druin was a big part of it. And I mentioned Sunderland against Utah earlier, and then Firth. I mean, I think we mentioned that last week. He's the guy that has really been the fulcrum for Cornell. I mean, Goldstein's getting his production no matter what. Teams that are not able to keep Firth in check have struggled against Cornell, and they were able to get him going in this one. And the 5 goals. 5 points, 2 turnovers is not a crazy gaudy line, but when you think about how good the Princeton defense has been, it does stand out. And again, like for Cornell, they've gone as Firth has gone, and in this game, he went far, and so did they.
I wonder what happened in that Colgate BU game. That's a game that I did not catch. Obviously, BU is going to be favored in that one. If they made it through Colgate, the remainder of their schedule didn't look that tough from what I remember. But I do wonder what happened in that Colgate Utah game. But appreciate the look at the efficiency frontier, sir. Anything on that Colgate Boston loss, because that is a tough loss for Boston when you talk about maybe an at-large.
Yeah, I mean, it was only the Syracuse game was the worst adjusted efficiency performance for the Terriers. So I think that's the thing that stands out. I mean, their defensive numbers were not great either. Yeah. But I mean, it was a bottom 2 defensive game for them. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's you wonder if there was a little bit of look ahead there because they've got Harvard next, and Harvard's the game that if they really had a shot at an at-large, that's the one they needed. And you just wonder if there was a little bit of like preparing for the next opponent and maybe overlooking a Colgate team that I think came in without any Patriot League wins. So yeah, it's the Patriot League for you.
Yeah, that you do a great job of pointing that out. All right, folks, 57 minutes. We talked college lacrosse. We touched on some players, some teams, the fact that I hate the Big Ten plus subscription model. We'll see what happens with that Richmond. From what I'm hearing, it's going to be on somewhere. Okay, so like we're gonna be able to watch that happen.
Does somewhere include like the guy streaming it from his phone, or you mean podcast production? Actual.
It will be better than a phone. I will say that it'll be better than the phone. Okay, guys, appreciate you so much. I'll let Zack have the last word, but JJ, thanks for popping into the chat and a few more of you guys, and those that watch afterwards. I know we get a ton of folks tuning in post live. We see you guys. We see the growth with what we've been able to get out here, and it helps us, really get energized when we see those comments rolling through. So please do what you can to support the show. Otherwise, Zack, take it away, man. Great job.
Yeah, I mean, have a good spring break. I think we'll be off next week. So this was, we'll have everybody just need to kind of analyze the games and the bracketology on their own. Maybe I don't know how the lacrosse universe is going to handle it.
I don't know, but great job being a professional there. Yes, we are off next week. We will see you the following week beyond that. So a little bit of time without us, but thank you again for tuning in, guys. See you later.